Hey, the midterms are happening right now, and I'm still doing album reviews, cause why not? What's up? It's the Culture Detective here investigating your favorite albums, and today I am going to do an album review on not the latest, the second latest Swans album, The Glowing Man. Yes, Swans have just released their latest album for some reason, and I didn't know that they're gonna drop an album this fast. I mean, yeah, I know it's been like 3 years since The Glowing Man, but didn't they say The Glowing Man would be their last album in this era? I thought there's gonna be a longer period of time between The Glowing Man and Leaving Meaning. Anyway, I will talk about Leaving Meaning like next week after I finish the midterms. Swans. New York experimental noise rock, post rock band Swans. They have been dropping albums for a very 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 long time, and I don't want to spend another few minutes just talking about all their past albums. And I must say, they have come a long way. They started off their discography with primal, raw, abrasive noise rock, and then they stopped making music after Soundtracks for the Blind, which is this really interesting double album with a lot of sound snippets, sound collages, but also these really long, dreary post-rock monsters. And then they came back in the year 2010 with the album My Father Will Guide Me a Rope Up the Sky, which is sort of underwhelming. But then afterwards, they presented us with a trilogy of albums, of double albums, where they sort of explore a newer sound, where their music gets way more cinematic, way more layered, way more cognitive and cerebral, but also at the same time just as visceral, frightening, disturbing, loud, and larger than life, just like their previous materials, if not even more. But this album, The Glowing Man, is the last album of the trilogy, where the first one is The Seer, which is very sinister, very evil, and then we have the second one, To Be Kind, which is my favorite Swans album because it's just so violent, just so raw and gross and disgusting. It's actually one of the most intense spiritual musical experiences of the decade. But this one, it's not as intense or as violent. It's way more spiritual, way more cerebral, and meditative. It's a very meditative album this time. Again, it's 2 hours long, but it's only 8 tracks long. Some of these tracks on the album are over 25 minutes long. And yeah, it's not for easy music listeners. Given how meditative the music on this album is, this album is actually a really good album to study along to if you need to do revision for like a test or something, and you don't want to listen to lo-fi hip-hop because you've listened to it for too much and it's for normies. Come on, guys, listen to this album. It definitely works. Also, I really like the album cover for this album. The first time I saw it, I thought the album title is going to be related to strength or strong, because the album cover, the figure on the album cover looks like the Chinese word for strength or strong. Yeah, it's The Glowing Man, so here we are. Anyway, the album starts off with two clouds. Cloud of Forgetting, which is 12 minutes long, and then Cloud of Unknowing, which is like 25 minutes long. The former is Cloud of Forgetting, and it isn't the most cinematic or dramatic opening to albums. It's very slow, very subdued, very spacey, but it's actually a very brilliant tone setter for the album because it's just so desperate. It's like walking to the edge of the world on top of the tallest mountain in the world, just gazing down upon the everything, looking up to see the universe. It's very transcendent. The guitars are somewhat dreary, and the yelps, they are very echoey in that they reach a million miles uh, in the horizon. It's stretched very far, very broad, and some of the guitars on the track is also very soft and feathery. And that's pretty much the entire track. And while it's very drony and ambient-like, it's not to say that it is uneventful, because it sort of locks you into this certain mood, and it's a spiritual experience, you know. Around the 10-minute mark, the song sort of gets a little noisier, a little louder, but that's just 1 minute or so. So the track overall is still very cumbersome. And then we have the second cloud, the cloud of Unknowing, which is a little more flavorful than the previous track. We get these very tense, plucky strings in the beginning, which sort of sets this really urgent and worrisome tone. We also get these wailing slide guitars, which adds a bit of an evil flavor to the track. And sooner in the track, we get these loud, lumbering drums that are very large in scale. And we also, again, get these desperate yelps and just loud expressions. It's like we're listening to a very spiritual, religious chant, and Swans flavored. And it's really nice. And about after the halfway point of the track, we get some tubular bells, some really urgent but also dramatic guitar riffs, and also some spacey guitar sections as well. And it actually kind of reminds me of the track Avatar off of the Seer album. And yeah, it's 25 minutes long, but I still really like it for how textured and flavored it is, and again, spiritual. And then we have a 14-minute long track called The World Looks Red, The World Looks Black, where it puts you into an even spacier mood, where we get these dense, worrisome instrumentations and these really beautiful watery pianos that just goes and flows around. The first half of the track, The World Looks Red, feels a little aimless, a little directionless, but the second half is certainly spectacular in that we get some jangly guitars, some urgent guitar riffs, some very hypnotic mantras and jazzy flutes, and we also get these very harsh strikes of just every instrument at some point at the second half, and we also get these zany horns and these zany vocals. Follow the Superman, follow the Superman. And then afterwards, we have the last track off of disc 1, and that is People Like Us. And this is one of the shorter tracks on the album where it's this breather, which I really like. And essentially, this is a very dramatic but also dejected gothy country folk ballad with some really poetic but also apocalyptic lyrics. And Michael Giroux gives a really theatrical performance on the track. And yeah, even though it's a breather and it's meant to be slower and drearier, still, it's a little off-kiltered. Something's a little off with this track. And again, that's what I really love about Swans music, is that even though it feels kind of serene, there's still something wrong with the track. And then afterwards, we get a giant track called Frankie M, about 30 minutes long. A little less, I think 26, around 26-ish, I forgot. But essentially, the entire first half of the track is the intro, where we get this building wall of noise that just gets louder and louder and louder and louder, and it's actually really powerful. Unlike tracks like Bring the Sun, where the build-up is incredibly empowering, this one is not empowering, it's more I don't know how to describe it. It's powerful, but not in that you feel empowered, but in that you feel in awe, more like. Anyway, this building wall of noise is actually pretty amazing. At first, it feels barren. It feels like we're in the middle of a very toxic, broken wasteland. But then we have the main character of the song, Frankie M, who arises from the dust and the dirt and suddenly realizes his spiritual purpose and now is on a mission to reach that purpose. And this is what this song sounds like. It feels very purposeful. And the lyrics here, they are even more interesting than that. We have Frankie M essentially taking a lot of drugs. A lot of drugs. Because he wants to, I guess, reach that purpose, but ended up realizing that drugs isn't a wise idea at all. After the halfway point of the track, we get these constant drum beats, a really nice, urgent guitar riff that really drives the whole thing forward, and it's actually pretty catchy. I also really like the backup vocals of the track. And then afterwards, we have the track When Will I Return? And it's a song sung by Michael Giroir's wife, Jennifer Giroir, and it's a song about surviving a sexual assault. And it has some really heart-wrenching lyrics about sexual assault. And the track is also a very chilling ballad with some evil keyboards and some twiddling guitars at the end, which feels kind of goosebumps-y. But everything before that feels a little uneventful. So yes, while I like the track and I think it's a really good ballad, it's not one of the more flavorful or memorable moments on the album. But I can't say that for the next track, the title track, The Glowing Man, where it is 29 minutes long, almost 29 minutes long, and it's another giant track. And unlike other tracks on the album, this track is pretty raw and aggressive and primal, similar to the ones on To Be Kind, except maybe not as aggressive. But still, I really love the track. At first, we get this bed of just sounds and noise that just sets the tone. And then we get this really repetitive part in the beginning where it's violent, it's chaotic, it feels like you're ascending to heaven, but after you have ascended to heaven, you realize that everything's chaos and mayhem up there. After some really messy and chaotic strikes of instrumentals, at some point in the track, we get this really constant groove and this constant drum beat that's really heavy and almost kind of krautrockian. And we also get this really nice, disoriented background vocals, which just makes the track even more hectic and freaky and urgent. And it's one really fun, wild track. Not gonna lie. Just have a standing beside my love. Just have a saying that I am a liar. And the album ends off with Finally Peace. A very fitting title because, again, Giroir says that this album will be their last album in their current incarnation. So yeah, this is kind of their last track. In the era, anyway. And this is actually a really beautiful ending to the album. It feels like we have finally reached heaven. We have finally ascended to heaven. And we have finally found our purpose of life. And that is to not be worried of everything and be free from everything. At least that's how I read the lyrics. The lyrics here, they are very metaphorical, kind of philosophical, kind of abstract. All creation is hollow, a picture's a shadow. But yeah, the instrumentals, they are fantastic. They feel otherworldly, they feel transcendent, they have a really bright, sunny tone to it. But at the same time, it's a goodbye song. It's a kind of farewell song. And yeah, it feels ultimate. It feels like an ultimate finale that's satisfying and wholesome and gratifying. And I just really appreciate that. So yes, while this album isn't as hard-hitting or as raw or as empowering and as visceral as To Be Kind, nor is it as sinister and as evil and twisted as The Seer. It still feels like a really cerebral, cognitive, spiritual experience that's very meditative, and it has a really beautiful ending, and I still love it a lot. I think pretty much every single track is great. So yeah, my favorite track here is the title track. My least favorite is When Will I Return, unfortunately, and I have to give Swans, The Glowing Man, a 9 out of 10. So, have you listened to The Glowing Man from 1 to 10? How much did you rate it? Like if you like it, and subscribe if you want more, and thanks for watching. Also, I will do a couple more album reviews until I start reviewing Kanye West's Jesus is King, Swans' Leaving Meaning, and also Clipping's latest album.